It was a beautiful day for playing outside. Katie found out that when you blow on a puffy dandelion, you help the plant spread its seeds. Orbie learned that if you let go of your picture on a windy day, the wind likes to play with it. And they both discovered that birds love to fly with friends. Orbie was trying hard to finish his drawing when he saw a bright red bird fly into the garden next door. Just as it disappeared behind the hedge, Katie came out with a juiceable for Orbie. She spotted a beautiful yellow bird as it flew right over the hedge, too. As he slurped his juiceable, Orbie began to wonder why all the birds weren't visiting their garden. When he burbled this to Katie, she shrugged her shoulders. She didn't know. It was a mystery. Maybe they could be bird detectives and find out. Mom, who was working in the garden, told them it was fine to do that. And when the two friends silently stood between the houses, it was clear that the birds were all landing in Lucy's yard next door. Lucy and her family had lived next door for the last several months. She was very friendly, and she and Mom laughed a lot together. As they tiptoed along beside the house, Orbie noticed a bright red bird sitting in the tree. It didn't swoop down, but just sat and watched whatever was going on in the backyard. Orbie burbled to Katie that she'd better get ready to solve the mystery as they reached the corner of the house. But I have to say that neither Katie nor Orbie was ready for the amazing sight that came next. Lucy's backyard was absolutely full of birds. They were all different colors. There were birds hopping about on the ground, birds perched up on lots of feeding stations, and birds splashing in the bird bath. Orbie raced over to them. In a huge fluttering of wings, the birds lifted off the ground and all disappeared into the sky above. Orbie was horrified. He hadn't meant to scare them. Lucy, who was filling a little feeder next to the house, turned to see what had happened. She welcomed the two bird detectives. Orbie felt bad about scaring the birds. She looked up at the sky and told him they'd be back once they realized everything was all right. She asked Katie and Orbie if they knew that the tiniest bird in the world loved the color red and didn't eat birdseed at all. The detectives shook their heads. She told Katie and Orbie that the hummingbird lived on nectar from flowers and loved her made-to-order sugar water. Lucy held up the hummingbird feeder and asked Orbie if he wanted to hang it in the tree for her. Well, as you can imagine, in a streak of pink, he raced over to the tree and climbed up to the hanger. As Lucy reached up with the hummingbird feeder, Orbie hooked it on. Katie was pretty sure the hummingbirds were watching because right after Lucy and Orbie moved away, two super fast hummingbirds hummed down to the feeder. They were so tiny. They hung in the air, pecking at the tube with the red flower bottom. Orbie thought he might like to have those super fast flyers visit his house sometime, too. At that minute, a brave bluebird flew down and took a good look at Orbie. And Lucy explained to the detectives that this bird was a blue jay. He was such a grumpy bird that when he was at the feeders, other birds stayed away. The blue jay stuffed his cheeks with seeds from the platform feeder and from the ground and flew off. Katie thought he sure looked pretty, and Lucy did too. Then another type of bird splashed down in the bird bath. Orbie whispered that he knew this one was a robin. Lucy nodded. Orbie was a very clever bird detective. He felt pretty good about that. Suddenly, in a flurry of wings, at least 20 birds swooped down and landed in the garden. It was very exciting. Katie asked Lucy why so many birds came to her backyard. And she smiled. She thought of her backyard as being the very best bird restaurant in town. She told Katie and Orbie she made sure to have lots of different kinds of bird seed for all the different birds. She worked hard to feed them just what they wanted, like a restaurant. Lucy told the friends that the yellow birds were American goldfinches. As they watched the birds, she told them that the goldfinches didn't like anybody to take their place at the platform feeder. They were very fussy and picked through the seeds, throwing most of them on the ground. When they found one that they liked, they ate it right up. Orbie looked up. The red bird was still sitting in the tree. Just then, some beautiful pink ones landed on another platform. Lucy whispered that these were mourning doves, and they had the saddest songs of any bird. Detective Katie pointed out that they were bigger than the rest. Lucy told her that she had a very good eye for birds, and that made her feel proud. Detective Orbie was very puzzled about something. He asked Lucy why the beautiful red bird in the tree just sat and watched. Lucy pointed out that Orbie was a good observer. That meant someone who noticed everything. The red bird was a cardinal. This was a boy bird and was actually a very shy sort. Cardinals always travel as couples, you know, in twos, and only ate when all the other birds were gone. Orbie was amazed and didn't even notice two hummingbirds zipping past his nose. Katie wondered where the cardinal's partner was. Lucy pointed to a branch much higher up the tree. There sat a similar bird, but not as brightly colored as the boy. Lucy explained that almost all female or girl birds are a duller color, so they can hide and keep safe in the nest with their babies. Well, they learned about birds all morning, which Lucy told her friends was called a really funny word, ornithology. That meant the study of birds. With delight, Katie and Orbie decided that they wouldn't be detectives anymore. They'd be ornithologists, just like Lucy. And you can be one too, if you want to be. I bet you can get to know and understand all sorts of birds. They sure have a lot of things to show you, just like they showed Katie and Orbie.